Meanwhile, on the Hill today, Justice for All Canada held another news conference calling on the Prime Minister to support a ceasefire in the conflict, pointing to the thousands of lives already lost in the last 4 weeks of fighting. Ahmad Al-Qadi is with Justice for All Canada, a human rights group that speaks out for persecuted Muslim minority communities around the world. Mr. Al-Qadi, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in calling for this ceasefire, you say that the Trudeau government has essentially helped in the, quote, indiscriminate murder of civilians. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So when you have the Israeli government, right after October 7th, make multiple claims, such as Palestinians are human animals, that they're going to flatten Gaza, that there are no innocent civilians in Gaza, that they're going to decimate Gaza through any means necessary, that they will do anything in order to win. And then you have, our Canadian government openly and unequivocally providing their support and abetting in this claim, then there's no question about it. They're complicit, and they have enabled the murder of over 10,000 civilians, 10,000 innocent civilians, over 4,000 children. They have enabled and abetted the cutting of electricity, food, fuel, water, all sorts of necessities to life. Hospitals in Gaza right now are on the brink of collapse. There are hospitals that are so short on fuel that they had to suspend their surgery units. They can't operate on emergency surgeries anymore because of a lack of fuel. Similarly, with Canada's $21 million in funding in arms sales to the Israeli government, we are actively complicit in weapons that are being used to target civilians indiscriminately, and it must stop.
The Prime Minister, though, has called for a humanitarian pause to get aid through to the region, to de-escalate the situation, and to listen to him, to get all parties involved, basically exploring a two-state solution again. Does that mean anything?
Truthfully, right now, a two-state solution does not mean anything. I'm a Palestinian myself, as well as an employee for Justice for All Canada. The reason a two-state solution right now would not mean anything is because that is a long-term solution. That is step 10. When you're talking about a humanitarian pause, you're essentially talking about a coffee break for the civilians who have done nothing wrong, who are victims of a war crime that is collective punishment, done nothing wrong, coffee break for you to get your energy back, and then jump right back into being butchered. Let's be practical here. Mm-hmm. We need a legitimate ceasefire to cease hostilities and prevent further loss of civilian life.
The Israeli
ceasefire.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as you're saying that, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he says that there can be no pause, no ceasefire of any kind until Hamas releases the hostages that are still in their custody. What would you say to that condition?
So when you're talking about, again, there's been discussion surrounding the fact that, Hamas is not cooperating, that the Israeli government is doing everything it can to prevent loss of civilian life. The Israeli government currently does not care about eradicating Hamas. When you're talking about a government that, again, has eliminated all sources of life in a city and has indiscriminately bombed civilians, we have to, as educated as a country that stands for human rights and is a peacekeeping nation, we have to open our eyes and face the music and recognize that the Israeli government does not currently care about eradicating Hamas. They're just collectively punishing a group of people, 2.2 million people, half of them children, for just being born in Gaza. I'm not here to speak as a spokesperson for Hamas. Mm-hmm. We're not Justice for All. We're not spokesperson for Hamas, so we can't speak to any of the politics surrounding the region. But we know that the solution right now is not to continue bombarding civilians and killing indiscriminately.
So what would you like to see from Canada and from Canadians at this point, then?
So Canadians, 71% of Canadians in a recent poll have called for the government to push for a ceasefire. This is not, Justice for All is not a monolith. We're joined by 700 organizations globally who have called for ceasefires. Many within the United Nations, including the Human Rights Commissioner, has called for a ceasefire. We'd like to commend the NDP for unequivocally calling for a ceasefire as a party policy. What we need to see is, first of all, an immediate ceasefire. Secondly, Canada must re-establish and recognize the ICC's jurisdiction over investigating the Israeli government for war crimes in Palestine. Thirdly, Canada must review its arms sales to the Israeli government so that our country and our taxpayer dollars are not complicit in the murder of civilians.
Ahmad Al-Qadi, I appreciate the time. Thank you for this.
If I could just reiterate a point that I made earlier. The reason I said that, I just want to be clear, the reason I said that the two-state solution is not viable right now is because that's step number 10. Right now, we can't even establish step number 1, which is establishing a humanitarian corridor, ending the siege on Gaza, and pushing for a ceasefire. Once we can hold the Israeli government accountable for its actions, for its complicit murder, for its deliberate murder of civilians, then we can talk about long-term solutions. But right now, we need the government to take its head truthfully out of the clouds, come back down to earth, and look at tangible, achievable short-term solutions that will prevent the loss of civilian life. Thank you.
Ahmad Al-Qadi, again, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Take care.